We already are, sir. I'd like to bring this meeting to order. This is a regularly scheduled meeting of the Transportation Technical Coordinating Committee. My name is Matt Minier with the city of Jeffersontown. I want to welcome everybody. Andy, if you could call the roll.
Sure will. Bullitt County.
Here, Keith Griffin.
Thank you. City of Charlestown. City of Jeffersontown.
Here.
City of Jeffersonville. City of Mount Washington. City of New Albany. City of Shepherdsville. Here's one. City of St. Matthews.
Here.
Clark County.
Here.
Floyd County. IDEM. INDOT. KYTC. KYTC District 5.
Come on.
Thank you. Kip is here. KYTC Office of Transportation and Delivery. So, Louisville Metro Air Pollution Control District.
Bradley's here.
Hi, Bradley. I see Rachel's name on there too. Thank you all for doing this. Those didn't know, Michelle King is the new Parks Director at Louisville Metro. Soon, either some point later this month, if I'm not mistaken. Louisville Metro.
Sorry, we had a little trouble getting our audio connected here at APCD, but I am here with Rachel Hamilton, the Air Pollution Control District Director, who will be joining you all as our representative for the time being, at least.
Thank you all both for joining us, and congratulations in front of others, Michelle, on your new gig.
Thank you.
Louisville Metro Economic Development. Louisville Metro Planning and Design.
Here.
Hey, Brian. Louisville Metro Public Works. Regional Airport Authority. Louisville River Port Authority.
I'm here today.
Hi, Miguel.
Hello.
Oldham County.
Jim Silverman here.
Hi, Jim. I see Mike King. I'll check Mike King off Louisville Metro Economic Development, or on our list, Economic Development. Oldham County Planning Commission. Port of Indiana. Park Accessibility Advisory Council. Town of Clarksville.
Mike Huff's here.
Hi, Mike. I saw Mike on there. That was Mike. Huff. And then TARC.
Aida Kopic.
Oh, yeah.
Hi.
All right. Thank you all for joining us. For our advisory members, Tanya, is that Tanya Higgin out there? I see a Tanya.
Hello. Good morning or afternoon
morning.
now.
Yeah. See Arthur Jones from Shepherdsville. Thank you for joining us, Arthur. And I see somebody else connecting to audio. Who's that? Is that Larry? It looks like Larry Summers sitting in the lobby, so we most certainly have a quorum as we get situated. Oh, thank you,
Andy.
Thank you.
Next item on the agenda is the May meeting minutes. Everyone should receive them in their packets. If there's any corrections, I would note them at this particular time. If there are none, I would entertain a motion for approval of the minutes. Got a motion? Is there a second? Second. Second. All those in favor signify by saying aye or raise your hand. Aye. Aye. Opposed, like sign. Motion carried. Next item on the agenda is the Transportation Policy Committee report. Andy?
Yes, sir. I will quickly recap our events of our TPC meeting that was held here on Thursday, May 23rd. We had a special guest attend. We had multiple special guests. The first one was from Louisville Metro Police Department. We asked some of the traffic division to come out and talk about how they plan for special events and shared some of his knowledge. Lieutenant Butch Isbell was here on their behalf, and he was talking about how they prepare for events like Derby, for the TJ, for the Cyclopia. I think that was this past weekend, was it not? And he was talking about how they were getting some stuff underway for that. So I thought that was interesting. I hope that those that were in attendance thought so as well. We did updates to our project management guidebook in Amendment 6, just like we did in TTCC last month. Russ Greenleaf from TARC joined us remotely to talk about the availability, the ongoing availability, I should say, of Section 5310 award dollars. Those are funds for typically go toward or for nonprofit agencies that apply to, among other things, I guess, acquire vans for their nonprofits. So it has to be for that funding program is exclusively for seniors and disabled folks. That deadline, by the way, to apply for some of that money through TARC is in late June 27th, if I'm not mistaken. So for more information, just reach out to KIPTA staff or to TARC directly for more information. We have another special guest, Mr. Jeremy Kramer. He's the Vice President of the Louisville, Indiana Railroad. And that railroad is looking, they're the ones that has that, the lift bridge that's also known, I think, as the 14th Street Bridge downtown, just west of downtown. That bridge needs some almost emergency repairs. And so they're seeking some grant funding through Federal Railroad Administration. And Mr. Kramer came to KIPTA asking for as many letters of support as he could drum up for their pending grant application that was due by the end of May. And so and thank you to those agencies, because I saw that several of them came in. Thank you to those agencies that did help them out. So that sounds like that's a big deal for them. So I'd be happy to answer any questions, but that concludes that report.
Thank you, Andy. Is there any further questions for Andy? Next item on the agenda is public comment period, right?
Yes, not received any public comments prior to the meeting, not seeing any in the Q&A, but if you comes up, I'll bring up another business.
Thank you, Greg, appreciate it. Next item on the agenda is the Monon South Trail. Andy?
Yes, sir. Mr. Ryan Hughes of Clark Dietz is here today to talk about his firm's work and his personal work, for that matter, in terms of the Monon South Trail. For those that don't know, this is a very significant rails to trails project in southern Indiana. Goes well beyond the KIPTA region. Only portion of it, frankly, is in the KIPTA region. So it's a fantastic project that's in the works. And Ryan, happy to have you.
Sure.
Floor yours.
Thank you, Chairman Matt, and thank you to Chris Nichols for asking me to come to present. You saw a similar presentation at Purdue's Road School back in the spring. And then at the same time, we were also working on getting this project added to the TIP, which was approved last month, I believe. And so it was a good time to come in front of KIPTA and share a little bit about this really neat project. I'm Ryan Hughes. I'm a transportation engineer and project manager with Clark Dietz. We're an engineering firm in Indiana and Kentucky and a few other states as well. We have a big team, which you see up here, of sub-consultants on this project that I wanted to highlight a little bit as well. And then Radius Indiana, whom I'll talk about later, is our client. I'm going to dive right in. I have maybe 10 minutes of mostly pictures, so hopefully it's a somewhat entertaining introduction to this really awesome project, as Andy stated. I'll talk about the background, dive a little bit into the trail design itself, and then talk about what is next. A quick overview to start. The Monon South Trail is about a 62-mile corridor as it stands right now, from just outside the city of New Albany limits all the way up north into Lawrence County, Indiana, through the town of Mitchell. It runs through a lot of small towns in southern Indiana. It runs through some really beautiful landscape, which I'll highlight as well. This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to make a really, not only statewide, but nationwide recognized trail for the region, and we're really excited about it. I want to highlight as well that there are plans that the city of New Albany and Floyd County are working on with the state to extend the trail down into the city itself and the city proper. Those plans are underway also. That's outside of the railroad corridor itself, but it will be connected to the trail. And then eventually that connects to all of our wonderful regional trail amenities, including the Ohio River Greenways. The Monon rail line started back all the way in the 1850s and ran from Chicago down to Louisville and had a couple of spurs. It's called the Monon Railroad because it runs, it junctures two spurs in a small town called Monon, Indiana. This is a picture of one of the train lines pulling into Dearborn Station in Chicago. This is the map of that rail line. You can see Monon, Indiana, just northwest of Indianapolis. It's changed hands and names many times. This is a highlight of what we're looking at. So the green is the portion of the railroad that was rail banked for recreational trail usage. In 2010, CSX stopped using the railroad, and in 2018, they announced plans to formally abandon it. And then in January of 2022, Governor Holcomb in Indiana announced almost $30 million of funding through DNR's Next Level Trails program. This is a grant program that's been running for a few years in Indiana to support trail development. Announced a special award for the purchase of the railroad corridor through the rail banking process, and then the initial development phases of the trail. The state asked Radius Indiana, a nonprofit economic development agency, to oversee the purchase and then the development of the trail. So my client is actually Radius Indiana. It's a unique project in that a nonprofit economic development agency who is not in the business of building trails is now in the business of building a really big trail. And so that's been a neat opportunity and challenge on this project. And then again, I wanted to highlight our project team. We've been working closely with Taylor Seeker Williams Design Group for about 4 years now in envisioning the trail and then getting into the design. And then USI Consultants and Banning Engineering, our engineering partners, Lockmuller Group and Sesco Group are doing environmental regulation for us. In the summer of last year, I have a timeline I'll walk through quickly, but in the summer of last year, CSX's subcontractor was out there to remove all of the rail along the whole corridor. So it depends on the purchase agreements, but in this case, CSX was responsible for removing the rail, which in my opinion was good because I didn't want to have to learn how to remove rail properly off of an old rail line. They also had to improve the road crossings and repave those. And so that was something that we were involved with to make sure that those road crossings were actually lowered a bit from what they were previously. As you all are familiar with, sometimes those railroad bumps can be just quite severe. And this is one of the opportunities to make a quick improvement to the community. Again, in January, I think I said 22, but in January 23, Holcomb made the funding announcement. We were selected as a design firm in the spring of 23, and then we've been running full speed ahead ever since. We elected to perform a LiDAR survey of the 60-mile corridor rather than sending out topographic survey crews for 60 miles. And that's had its challenges, but mostly was a good decision to work from. We've done pickup surveys here and there. We had 6 community meetings in the summer and 2 more last fall. And then we had the opportunity to visit the Katy Trail in Missouri in August of last year. That's the longest rail trail in the nation. It's about 240 miles long. It's been open since the early 2000s or even the late 90s. And we wanted to learn what works and what doesn't. And then since then, we've been in design, hot and heavy in design. We hosted a contractors forum in December just to get some feedback on preliminary design. What did they want to see in the plans or the specs? What can we improve? And just to get the project on the map for them. And then just last week, we bid the first phase of the project, which I'll highlight here is segmented, but it adds up to about 20 miles. We will begin construction on that 20 miles this summer. One neat aspect of the project is it's such a large program. We're calling it a program that we've tried to find interesting tools to help us out with this. I was talking earlier about the GIS program that we're setting up for the trail program. One of our partners, Banning Engineering, has the capability to go out and use a 360-degree camera and take Google Street View imagery of a trail or a site and upload it straight to Google Maps. So if you go to Google Maps today, you can drop the little Google Street View person right on parts of the trail and then kind of walk the trail virtually, which is a really neat design tool for us, but also a great public outreach tool. There's a lot of great historical components on the trail that we're trying to salvage and highlight. These are some of the earlier versions of the signals and semaphore signal towers on the corridor. And then there's a lot of neat structures out there. We don't have any big, beautiful truss bridges, but we do have some really large, beefy concrete bridges meant to carry really heavy railroad cars. Again, I wanted to throw this map up again just to make sure everyone's kind of familiar with the trail corridor and what we run through. So as Andy said, we just touched the Kipta region. The funding for the project was split between Radius Indiana, which oversees the orange portion. So Lawrence, Orange County, Washington County, and then Clark County, which is Kipta County, of course. And then the city of New Albany is overseeing the portion of development in red on this map, which is actually in Floyd County and ends at IUS Southeast on Grant Line Road. And I'll blitz real quickly through some trail design slides here. Greg, will you give me a quick spin on the mouse just to make sure that it frees up? It's trying.
Showing something else on his.
Yeah.
Can everybody hear us out in the audience? Or we
lose it, but
Hear y'all fine.
okay. Hang with us.
let me stop sharing real quick. I think I lost it, so that's what I think.
Yeah, I got lost.
Yeah, Wi-Fi drops. Oh, man, internet.
So they can, we can still see.
It's, yeah, because they're connected in, so that's fine.
Oh, that one's hardwired.
That one's hardwired in, yeah, that's why I do that.
Hardwired. We're on Wi-Fi. Isn't mine on Wi-Fi?
Yeah.
So, Miguel, I think that was you that said so. You can still hear me?
Yes, sir. I can hear everybody in the room fine.
Okay. What's happened is that we've lost our Wi-Fi in the room, which is what the presentation is on. But the computer that you can see right now, you can see Tom and Keith and me on. That's connected to a hardwired computer. So would it be possible to run?
I'm up.
Okay.
I got, it's just the one kicked the, like the main one, the guest one's working okay. Looks there.
All right. We're getting there. Sorry about this. Ryan's got some good pictures. They look good on the screen that I can see over here.
Get to the good part.
Yeah.
Never had an intermission in a 10-minute presentation until today.
For your halftime entertainment.
That's right.
Here we go.
Nice.
Yeah, right. 18.
All right. Can everybody see it on that's out there in the cyberspace?
Yes.
All right, back on. Thank you, Greg. Thanks,
Yeah.
Andy. Typical cross section. This shows what the trail corridor looked like before. So if you're like me, you might have thought, well, we could easily slap a trail right on top of the railroad corridor. That's not the case. Rails are only about really 4.5 foot apart. The top of that embankment is only about 9 foot wide, and we need about 14 foot wide to get a 10 or 12 foot trail with some shoulders on it. This is what the corridor looked like before the rails were taken out last year. And then, so post-track and tie removal, this is what we were expecting to get the corridor with to start with. About 11 foot wide top of bank, depending on where you are along the corridor. But again, what we need is at least a 14-foot shelf. And so our final design looks like this, a 10 foot wide multi-use trail We elected to go with 10 instead of 12, given obviously cost is a factor, but also this being a primarily rural section of trail with 2-foot shoulders on both sides. So there's a significant amount of grading that still has to be done, even though we're working on an old rail line. This is a snapshot from the Katy Trail in Missouri on our tour. All of the Katy Trail is unpaved, but it's a crushed aggregate and crushed limestone trail that's really, really hard packed. And you can ride a typical road cycle on this material. In Indiana, we don't have a lot of this. And so when we say unpaved trail, people think just a gravel road. And they say, well, I'm not gonna want to bike on that. We've had to really educate folks on what this trail can be. And we've elected to go with a mix of paved and unpaved surfaces. Our friends at Taylor Seeker Williams Design Group have led the trail design standards effort. They've come up with some great renderings of what the trail will look like. We've come up with templates for a typical urban street crossing and a typical rural street crossing, using examples from other trails across the nation, and then of course, trail design guidelines. This is the template for a typical trailhead. Not too large, but it has some shaded and shelter area, 2-stall restroom, bike parking, and then water fountain and dog fountain, in addition to some parking spots. This can be kind of shape shifted depending on the community that we're in and what the context of the area is. The architects and planners came up with a material scheme that kind of harkens to 2 things. One, the old railroad, so dark steel colors and materials and textures, and then also the natural landscape and beauty of southern Indiana. So there's a lot of light wood colors and textures in the design elements as well. In some of these small towns, we run into really interesting situations where we have a road, a local road on one or both sides of the street. This is what downtown Borden, Indiana looks like. We have a small local road on both sides of the street, so we had to configure some vehicular low-speed guardrails and how to integrate that and make sure that it's still safe to have folks in the middle. And then this is an early schematic from a few years ago of what the signage could look like, and then that's evolved over time to what we have in our final plans and the final materials palette that's shown here. And then I wanted to highlight some of these neat structures that are out there. This first one that's being shown, we did an inspection of about 15 structures. There's 30, almost 40 structures on the entire 60-mile corridor in total. This is one of the larger ones. If you look closely, you can see that CSX, or one of the railroads at one point in time, went in and encased that center pier with another 3 or 4 foot of concrete. So there's just some really interesting structures out there. Some of these are supported by old rail line pieces themselves on the foundation of the bridge. It's been a unique challenge to assess each of these structures individually and figure out how we're going to get the trail safely across it. This is the underside of one of the larger structures south of Pekin, or New Pekin, Indiana. One thing we've come to learn is that these were built to carry really heavy rail lines, and while there's some deterioration on some of the components of them, we only needed to do minor structural repairs on most of them to get a bridge safely across. So we have no full bridge replacements in phase 1, which certainly helps save on cost. The table here to highlight is the one in the top right. So we have about 20.5 miles in phase 1A. That's the one that just let for construction last week. About half of that is aggregate and half of it is paved. And these are the segments that run through the communities of southern Indiana, which I'll show a map of in a moment. One of the neatest things for me on this project and leading this effort has been all the collaborations. I touched on this at road school with Chris. There's just been so many people and organizations who have been involved in this project, not just for the last year, but really for the last 4 years. And I've got some of them thrown up on here. The folks at Commitee have been instrumental in helping us certainly get some awareness in the region, but also make sure that we're strategically poised to get additional funding on top of the $30 million that's already been allocated to the project. So what's next? Phase 1A, like I said, was bid last week. We have a low bid of just under $16 million to build 20 miles of trail. those 20 miles are these red segments here. We wanted to build trail in the communities first. And so we are gonna have trail by the end of next year in most of the small towns throughout the southern Indiana region that this corridor covers. And then we have a long segment through Clark County to connect to Dean Lake Road and Dean Lake State Recreation Area, which is a DNR property. We will mostly have used up the initial funding, the $30 million. $5.5 million of that went to the purchase of the corridor, so that was gone right away. As I said, we have a low bid of $16 million. We still need to bid the trailheads themselves. We're not building those just yet. So the client and the community and the state are gonna be looking for additional funding resources to fill those gaps. But we're really excited to build these first 20 miles starting hopefully in the next month or so. If you all want to stay connected to the project, we'd love to have you stay connected. There's a couple ways to do that. We have a website, southern-indiana-trailways.org. That's a nonprofit that's been set up to eventually manage and run the trail itself. It's still mostly being done by Radius Indiana. And then Radius has a Facebook page and has created a separate Facebook page for the trail. And so we post frequent updates to that site as well. If I can give you one action item out of this presentation, I'd ask you to drive through some of these communities in southern Indiana if you haven't yet. I get to go out here about once a month, and I'm always struck by the beauty of southern Indiana. This is a photo I captured in the winter on a really clear day in the Knobs near Borden in Clark County. It's a really beautiful area. When we first met with some of these communities, we wanted to highlight the railroad and industry, et cetera, for the trail branding. And we quickly learned, no, we need to highlight the natural beauty of southern Indiana, the greenery, the agriculture, the karst topography that's out there. And so we've kind of leaned into that. And I really hope that you all can go out and see the southern Indiana landscape someday, or hopefully walk or bike on the trail eventually. So thanks again to Andy and Chris and Kipta for inviting me to present. I'd be happy to answer any questions right now or certainly after the meeting. And thank you, Matt.
You're welcome. That typical section, I guess all the rework has stayed within the existing railroad right away.
Yes, yeah, we've made a big priority to not get into the messiness of right of way. If you're curious, the right of way through the entire corridor is about 60 foot wide, 30 foot from center of trail or center of railroad. It varies on occasion here and there, but we felt pretty good about being able to develop the trail within that 60 foot right of way and not deal with right of way. We certainly didn't want to be taking any property from adjacent landowners as well.
Yeah. How many trailheads are envisioned?
Envisioned is more than what we're going to build first off. So about 6 trailheads for the 60 miles is what we'll start with, I think. And then we have some smaller trailheads that we call rest areas that are planned for some long rural stretches where you're not going to be in a town for maybe 10 miles. Those won't be built in this next year, but those are on the plan as well.
How was your public engagement received? I mean, sometimes you put those trails through people's properties, but they see it between your properties and you yell safety issues.
That's right.
How did that come out in your public engagement section?
There was enough excitement about the trail project since the governor's announcement for it that we have run into a lot less negativity and opposition to the trail than I would have expected, or maybe you would have expected. On occasion, we get a lot of questions of who's going to manage the trail, who's going to take care of safety and responding to emergencies, things like that. And that's all being worked out. It's the responsibility of the owner of the trail, Radius Indiana. But for the most part, we don't receive a lot of negative opposition. It's been maybe 80-20 positive, negative, and that's been a good reason to be on the project. We've been surprised by that.
Yeah. Those get some early successes too in the northern part of the state. So.
Yeah, exactly. Folks in Indiana, especially through this grant funded program, it's called Next Level Trails. The state has been investing heavily in multi-use recreational trails. Like we were talking about, Matt, not just as a transportation method, but as a quality of life development and investment. And so folks in Indiana in the last 10 years have started to learn trails are good, and we want trails in our neighborhood or in our community or in our city and region. And so I think that helped lay the groundwork for some good public perception for the Monon South Trail.
Yeah, and that's one thing good came out of COVID, I guess. if people.
They want to be out walking and doing something, and it's fresh
And they
air.
expose themselves to trails, so now they understand that it has a functional benefit as well as a recreational.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Ryan.
Also, you said it was a blend of paved and unpaved trails. How are you making those distinctions?
We decided to pave within the communities, so for the most part, within the municipal boundaries of the communities on the trail, and then you'll enter a rural section and it will be unpaved.
Thank you, Ryan.
Yes,
Is there any
thank you.
other questions for Ryan? Okay, we'll move on to the next agenda, number 6, Highway Safety Improvement Program funding. Andy?
Yes, so I think I saw him earlier.
Yeah.
Taylor Rubel's on the line from NDOT. And NDOT announced that, earlier this month, if I'm not mistaken, they reminded us, some of our staff and some of the staffs, maybe the agencies in the room, at a Seymour District Safety Summit, is that what it's called? That was, the past couple weeks. And there's some, highway safety funding that's available to the Southern Indiana community. So we invited Taylor to come online and join us and talk a little bit about what NDOT has available for, our Southern Indiana agencies. Taylor?
Can't hear you, Taylor.
Taylor, you're on mute if you're trying to say something.
You know, he's connected to audio. Like.
Okay, just trying to figure out what it says.
Taylor.
Okay, all right.
Still can't hear you.
I was kicked out for a while.
So was I, but that, we were both on our Wi-Fi. I think that's the answer there. It seems like a different.
Yeah.
All right, good deal. Well, Taylor, if it's okay with you, we'll go on with our schedule. And at the absolute worst, we'll get to you in what we call other business at the end. So we'll try to get to you before then. If give us a signal of some sort or in the chat that if you think it's got to work, you got to work it. So let's go ahead and skip that agenda item for the time being. We'll bounce back to that. We're gonna skip that one, but we'll move on. We'll come back to it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Next item on the agenda is the number 7, MTO dedicated cost increases. Brady?
Thanks, Greg. So, announcement was made, via email to the Kentucky TTCC representatives on May 7th for a request for people to send in cost increases for fiscal 24 phases. And a reminder email was sent on May 22nd to get those applications in. And since that time, since last April TPC, more specifically, we've received 2 total MPO cost increase applications. So the first one from KYTC for KIP to ID 3069, Kentucky State Highway 150. It's for a fiscal year 24 design phase. There's just an updated estimate to the cost of that project phase, and they're requesting $55,200 federal, with a total increase with the match would equal $69,000. The result of what that would look like is shown in the box below. That's how the tip would eventually reflect that. So that's the first request, the $55,200 federal for that project. Second project from Oldham County, KIP to ID 2175. It's for their fiscal year 24 right-of-way phase. Same situation, updated cost increase estimate for this project to cover, I believe, KYC oversight fees, in addition to the already anticipated costs. So they are requesting $25,000 federal as an increase, and with the match, that would be $39,617. Once again, you can see what it would look like in the tip and the box below. Those changes would represent. Currently, in the fiscal year 24 SDBG cost increase reserve, there is over $1.1 million available. If both of these cost increase requests were approved, that would total $80,200. That would still leave, if both cost increase requests were approved, there would still be over $1 million left in fiscal year 24 SDBG cost increase reserve. That, unless there's any questions, I request action for recommending approval of the two proposed cost increase requests.
Thank you, Brady. As you state, this is an action item. Is there any further questions for Brady? If not, I would entertain a motion to recommend approval of the cost increases for these two projects.
I'll make that motion.
Second motion, is there a second?
Second.
Got a second? All those in favor signify by saying aye, or raise your hand.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Motion carried. Thank you, Brady. We're gonna go back to agenda item number 6, the Highway Safety Improvement Program. Andy.
Taylor, can we hear you now? I think he's got his phone ready.
Can you guys hear me? Can you hear me now?
We got you.
Yeah.
We got you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh. All right. We don't use Zoom much, so I'm a newbie at this. I don't have great pictures like the trail slides. Those are awesome. But I wanted to go over the one-time NOFA that we have this year for safety and answer any questions you guys might have. You probably all received a Gov delivery email on Monday that has a link to the NOFA in it. I'm going to share my screen if that's okay.
Yes, sure.
I assume you're all enrolled in Gov delivery. Can you guys see my screen?
Yes, we got you.
Okay, so we have a goal of reducing our fatalities in the state on both the local roads and the state roads by 25% over 10 years. That was in the SHSP, and it's also our NDOT goal here at NDOT. And so to that end, the commissioner wanted us to do a safety call, one-time safety call for rapid deployment or quick delivery type items that could be put in the ground rather quickly for the local. So this would be just for local communities and MPOs in Indiana, not for the state system. So the link in this email that went out Monday will take you to the NOFA site, and we're looking for submittals of safety, systemic safety type work types, things that wouldn't need right away or wouldn't have a lot of environmental impacts or long lead times for design, things like signs and markings and guardrail and the curb and gutter, or not curb and gutter, but like tough curb type improvements, quick delivery type items. So if you go to that link, and I have it up, it'll take you to our NOFA page. We have our regular NOFA at the end of the year, and then this is the special safety call in September. And if you click that, it'll download a document that walks you through everything you'll need to submit. Just like normal, we have a short form that you can fill out where you basically select the work types. There's all the normal systemic work types on there, and then there's one for other. If you have something that's not covered, but you think it's something that should fit in, you can submit that as well, and we can communicate over email on that and tell you whether or not that's going to be eligible. But it's pretty flexible as long as you think that this is something that can be delivered in that time frame. And something our commissioner really stressed with this is that he's looking for things that are not something you're doing already. This is incremental or new safety improvements in your community. So So yeah, I don't have a lot of pictures and stuff to show, but any questions on that?
Taylor, can you confirm that all Southern Indiana, or all Indiana entities are eligible? That is the group, typically group 1 or big MPO cities and counties, as well as the rural communities. Is that accurate? That all agencies would be eligible?
Yeah, that is my understanding. That's for all Indiana communities.
Good. Good. Because that's important. In our region, as you probably know, we've got many urban LPAs, and then we've got some, at least 2 that I can think of, that are both urban and rural. And so sometimes they can chase $1 and the other. Sometimes it's one or the other. And so in this case, it sounds like everybody's eligible for these funds.
Yes, and I believe this is a 90-10 split program.
Thank you, Taylor.
Thank you, Taylor. Is there any other questions for Taylor? All right, next item on the agenda, number 8, call for projects. Brady?
If that wasn't enough money that's made available to everybody, just wait. There's more.
So 2024 golf projects, KIPTA is sub-allocated funding from 6 different programs, 6 in Kentucky, 3 in Indiana. So you can see in the chart here, Kentucky receives, or we receive from sub-allocation in the state of Kentucky, CRP funds, carbon reduction program, STBG funds, and transportation alternative funds, whereas Indiana, we receive those, but we also receive those 3 other funding categories, CMAQ, protect funds, and our own version of HSIP. So the ones that were just stated by NDOT, there are HSIP state-controlled funds. We also get to have HSIP funds that we are able to sub-allocate. And so those are part of the discussion here. For more detailed information on what are the requirements and eligibility requirements for these programs, you can see the memo that I sent out related to this agenda item. There's also a one-sheeter that has some information about each of these programs. So we're going to go through each of them here. First off, who is an eligible sponsor in the KIPTA region for these funds? So all state and local public agencies within the KIPTA MPA boundary, as highlighted by the bold black line in the map to the right, they are eligible to compete for these funds. However, all projects awarded the funds must be located within the MPA boundary. That's significant. I think there might only be one case where that's significant, and that is Shelby County technically has a little part of Shelby County within our MPA boundary. So they are an eligible project sponsor, but Shelby County can only request funds for projects within Shelby County that are also within the MPA boundary. So they can't request funds for a project just outside Shelby, because it's not in our MPA boundaries. So what you really want to know is the total funding available for each state. So for Kentucky, in total, in aggregate, it's going to be over $51 million combined for all 3 of the Kentucky funding sources. And then in Indiana, we're looking at over 11.4 million for all 6 combined funding sources available for this call for projects. It's possible for Indiana because there's one project that's kind of pending of whether it's going to be using dedicated funds or be funded locally. If it is actually funded locally, and we should be finding out about that within the coming months, there may be more money available in Indiana. So it could actually be over 15.5 million in Indiana, depending on the status of that existing project. So to look more specifically at Indiana and how their 11 million/15 million of available funding breaks down. In Indiana, there is no carryover balance. So these numbers you're looking at here for each fiscal year, this is what our current tracking sheet shows for the carryover balance at the end of each year. The ones in red being year that is actually over programmed. We have more money programmed than what we are anticipating to be available. And the ones in black, being they're in black, they're under program. We have room to fund more money. So in fiscal year 25, there's $834,000 available that could be put towards projects. 26, 2.2 that could be put towards projects, et cetera. You can see down the line. Fiscal year 2030, we currently don't have anything programmed in fiscal 2030. So that's the anticipated allocation that we are planning to receive in fiscal year 2030. You may ask the question, Brady, the current federal funding bill, the IIJA, ends after fiscal year 26. How do you know how much money you're going to get allocated in fiscal year 30 or 29 or 28 or 27? And the answer to that is we don't know exactly what the number would be, but we do have an estimation of what we're going to have available for us in fiscal year 26. And so we're using what our anticipated number in fiscal year 26 and extrapolating that out on a flat rate. So whatever we think we're going to have in fiscal year 26, we're anticipating that exact number for fiscal year 2030. And as we get closer to the fiscal year 29 or fiscal year 2030, we'll have a better understanding of what that exact number is as we get a new federal funding bill. But that's the best conservative estimate that we can have at this time. A couple other notes about Indiana funding. You see the first asterisk there for fiscal year 25. The Indiana Gulf projects won't be awarded until and in the tip at the earliest until the beginning portion of 2025. So that's too late for us to allocate the $834,000 to projects and have them actually done by the end of Indiana's fiscal year. So we are going to plan to award those funds before the Gulf projects process, essentially. So next week, there's going to be a quarterly meeting in Indiana. I would invite all of our Indiana sponsors, if you have projects that need cost increases or you have additional projects that you would like to request funding for from one of our 6 funding sources, bring those suggestions with you to the quarterly meeting next week. We may make decisions at the time, but we don't really have to make decisions until probably around our next quarterly meeting planned for September. But we are hoping to have those funds awarded before this call for projects process due to the timing and the fact that Indiana can't carry over funds. So if they don't get it obligated on time in fiscal year 25, then we just lose out as a region. So we want to get those projects allocated. Second, double asterisk there shows the amount of money. This is for the second and third for fiscal year 27 and 28. If that one project I mentioned that may be funded locally as opposed to using its currently programmed into dedicated funds, if it is funded locally, that opens up a lot more money in fiscal year 27 and 28 potentially for projects. So if that happens, that 1.6 number in 2027 goes to 2.4. And in 2028, that $524,000 goes to over 3.8 million. So that could have a significant impact on how much money is available for this call. And we'll provide you an update as that becomes more clear. Another important aspect, we'll be able to see most of this from the Indiana perspective, is NDOT allows us to commingle the 6 funding sources. And the best way I can explain that is, for simplicity's sake, we have 6 funding sources. If Indiana sub-allocates us $1 million for each funding source, then that means in fiscal year 25, we have $6 million total from the 6 funding sources. We can choose to fund projects using $6 million of STBG in 2025, or we could choose to have $3 million of TA and $3 million of HSIP. We have flexibility in a single year how we use the funding sources, but we need to be able to show over the course of a longer period, in this case 10 years is our tracking sheet I'm about to go through. We need to show that we are programming at least 50% of the amount of money that we are allocated over a space of time. So if you look at the top here, You can't see it, but these top 4 rows there, those are representing CMAQ dollars in Indiana. So the top row is the fiscal year, and the second row is the annual allocation that we get each year, with the total being at the very right side. The row below that is the 50% allocation, the target we need to meet as an average over the course of the 10 years. And then the programmed amount, what we have programmed towards projects for that funding source over that amount of time. And so if you can see, for the annual allocation, we are allocated, I believe it's over $8 million of CMAQ over that projected time period. And the 50% mark we need to hit is a little over 4 million. But we have currently only programmed a little bit over 2 million. So there's a need from KIPTA's perspective that we need more CMAQ projects as a part of this call for projects. Same thing with CRP. You can see actually here that we're doing pretty good. Our 50% allocation is 1.7, but our programmed amount is 3.3. So we're over the 50% requirement, except for if the project that I mentioned earlier that is currently programmed for CRP, if it actually gets funded locally instead, then that number goes from 3.3 million to 0. And so therefore we within the under that 50% allocation market to meet CRP funding. So depending on the outcome of that project, CRP might be another funding source that we would prioritize in this call for projects. Same thing with TA. You can't see the bottom one there, but it is currently about right at that 50% number. You can't see it, but it's also another phase for that project that's maybe switching to local funds. So if that goes to local funds, then we're under the 50%. I say all that to say, this is why we would prioritize submitted projects for Indiana to some extent that are CMAQ eligible, CRP eligible, or TA eligible, because we need to meet these long-term goals for how the funding, flexible funding sources work in Indiana. Okay, is there any questions about Indiana funding, I guess, before I move to Kentucky?
I have a question.
Sure.
Erica Tate, Federal Highway, Indiana Division. Can you go back to that previous table?
Sure.
Are these the total allocation? Does that include all phases of a project or just construction?
These would be all. So the allocation rows are what's sub-allocated to us, and then the programmed amount is what we're programming the projects, and that would be for any phase.
Thank you very much.
Sure. Any other questions? Sure. If you think of any, let me know at the end. We'll start looking at Kentucky now. So this is specifically for the TA program in Kentucky, and Kentucky can carry over funds. So we treat them a little differently than we do in Indiana. The numbers you're seeing here are representative of the current status of the carryover balance for each of these funding sources. This one is just TA. So we're fully programmed out in fiscal year 25. We're actually over programmed slightly. So there is no more money to give in fiscal year 25. Whereas the other ones are in the black. Fiscal year 28 and 29 have nothing programmed in it. So that's 28 and 29 is our estimation for how much we are going to be sub-allocated in TA funding in those years. Fiscal year 27, we have 2.2 million still available. So that will also be available. So if you include the fiscal year 27 number, the fiscal year 28 number, and the fiscal year 29 number, you get the total availability of $7.1 million available for TA funding. The reason that that's the total and we don't add in the $292,000 to that number as well is because the $292,000 in fiscal 26 for this example is already tied into the $2.2 million in fiscal year 27. So it's carried over into fiscal year 27 as well. So if we had, for example, if we had programmed a new project phase in fiscal year 26 that's worth $292,000, then that is connected to the fiscal year 27 number. So if we programmed it something for 26, the 27 number would reduce from 2.2 down to 1.85 million, essentially. So we can push funding back if we needed, if there was a project phase, big construction phase in 2028, we wanted to fund, that's $4 million. We could take some of the money from 27 or 26 and pay for it in 28, but we can't do it vice versa. If there's a $4 million project phase that we want to do in 26, there's not money for it yet. So that will all be ironed out by the TTCC working group. But that's the amount of money available for TA funds. Similar situation for CRP funds in Kentucky, although we're not fully programmed out for fiscal year 25. But it is the same accounting situation for the total availability. So 28, 29 have nothing programmed in it currently. So those are the total amounts that you get for both years. And then in addition to that, you get the $806,000 number in 2027 that you can add to it that gets you the total availability of CRP and PO funding at 6.3, almost 6. STBG funding availability. We are fully programmed out of STBG funding through fiscal year 27. Currently, fiscal year 28 and 29. These are the numbers that it's a little different for STBG because we have the cost increase reserve. So we are actually suballocated by the state of Kentucky around a little over $23 million in STBG funds each year for 28 and 29 as our estimation. But because we cut off 20% from the top for that STBG cost increase reserve, the amount that's actually available at this time for the call for projects is that $18.8 million number you're seeing there for each year. So, so there's really not money available in 25, 26, or 27 unless there's some finagling with swapping projects back and forth. But there's not any new money to be added to those years outside of the cost increase reserve that is associated with each of those years. But there will be that 18 million for 2029 for STBG funds. Funding availability considerations. So for Kentucky, for all those three funding sources, there's $51 million available, but that's not really $51 million available for new projects. The TTCC working group is going to discuss all this and determine a recommendation for which project should be awarded. Are going to have to decide, well, how much of this funding that's available is going to go towards cost increases for existing projects or new phases for existing projects, and how much of that $51 million should go to brand new projects. And the same situation for Indiana's $11/15 million. So that'll be a consideration. A couple other notes from the guidebook: no more than 5% of the annual allocation of STBG MPO funding is to be used for planning studies in a given year. So that's a cap. For planning studies specifically, not planning phases, but planning studies. And then another note, a single phase for a project in the Kentucky STBG MPO program can receive is 50% of the adjusted annual allocation. So I just mentioned in the previous slide, the adjusted annual allocation for fiscal year 28 and 29 for STBG funds is that 18.8 million. So under the guidebook rules, we couldn't have a phase for those years that is over $9.5 million. If it's a bigger project than that, typically that's best for an alternative, larger funding source. Although the TTCC working group and eventually the TPC does have its prerogative, if there's one project that's $15 million and everyone thinks this is the best project ever, and we want to fund it, then it can be done, but that's not typically the process. So we have 51 million and 11 million in both states, but in reality for new projects, it's not quite that high. Okay, here's a timeline for the process for the call for projects and the eventual approval of the new tip that's associated with that. This schedule is on your handout, the one sheet you have in the room here, and it's also I'm gonna email that out as well after the meeting. So those of you online who don't have a physical copy, you'll be able to have this schedule as well. So administrative modifications will just continue to go as needed throughout the whole process, as they normally are. Amendment 7, project applications that Chris is going to talk about more later. Our deadline for that is going to be July 19th. Call for projects, applications open. This is one of the big ones. August 1st is the application opening for MPO dedicated call projects. We're going to have those quarterly / biannual meetings I mentioned earlier, first week of September. That'll be another opportunity for questions within the application period. And then the date that call for projects applications are due is October 31st. So you have from August 1st to October 31st to submit your applications, and a couple of months before then to start thinking about what you're going to be submitting. So a long time to get prepared here for this call. The month of November, the staff are going to be reviewing the applications and go through our scoring process to score the projects, get rankings from the TTCC working group to prepare for those meetings. We're proposing that the TTCC working group meet in December. We're hopefully we can get all of this done before people leave for the holidays, so you don't have to worry about any of this over time with holidays. If not, though, because usually this can take 2 or 3 meetings to actually get final decisions, then we have plenty of time in January to meet again for that TTCC working group that will eventually be formed. We're planning for the call for projects funding awards to take place at the February TPC. And then right after that, get into the process of submitting the fiscal year 25 to fiscal year 28 tip draft that has to go through an IAC meeting, has to go through 30 days of public comment, and eventually will get voted on by the TTCC and the TPC. And then it has to go through federal review after that. So let's see all that in the schedule. Okay. Last couple slides here. So this is our screenshot from KIPTA's transportation planning portal. So as far as when you're going to be actually applying for the call for projects in August, hopefully. If you have a project that is new to the tip, so you have a brand new project you want to request funds for, or you have an existing MPO dedicated project with proposed changes that represent a substantive change to the project's design, concept, location, or specifically the scope of the project. The scope of the project is changing, then you'll need to fill out a full project application. The reason we need that is because those projects will either need to receive a new score if it's new project, new MTP score, or they'll need to be rescored because the circumstances of the project have changed substantially. So full project application, it's the same spot it is for any other change, normal project change in between all projects. If you have an existing MPO dedicated project with just minor changes, or there's not any changes other than you're requesting updated funding. So maybe you have an existing project, you want a cost increase, you can just use the expedited project application. It's not going to have nearly as many questions that take a long time to answer because nothing about the project has really changed other than the cost. Can't see that, but existing MPO dedicated projects that don't have any changes, you don't need to change anything at all. You're good with how it's currently programmed. You don't need to submit anything to us. We'll just assume that everything is staying as it is and it's carrying over to the new tip as it is currently. One other note, these in previous iterations of call projects, you would have had to fill out one of these applications and a separate application, a lot of which the information is redundant. We've eliminated that redundancy, we've eliminated that separate application. So any of the questions that were in that previous separate application, you may remember, they will be included within these applications you'll be filling out. So it's just one application per project. And if it's more complicated as the circumstances I just said, then you'll need a full project application. If it's a very simple existing project that just needs more funding, you can fill out the expedited project application. Okay, this is a draft example of a couple of questions that you might see in these applications. This will probably be the first thing you see when you open either of these full or expedited project applications. So it'll ask you basically what kind of project are you submitting? Are you submitting an existing MPO dedicated project? It's already been awarded funds, it's in the tip, or it's already programmed. You can click that and get a certain set of questions. This application is this a new project that needs MPO dedicated funding? It's not the tip. Then you click that one and you get a slightly different set of questions. Or this application is for non-MPO dedicated projects. So if you need to fill out an application for us, but it's not actually for the call for projects, this would probably be for most commonly used by NDOT or KYTC that has a project on I-65 that they just need to update. You can click on this third bullet point and it skips all the projects questions, and you can just give us the information you need that would be incorporated in the next added bond or the testing. So that'll be something, and that's subject to a little bit of change, but the general idea of that is something you'll see. And the last slide I have today is an important one for the application process. So if you're doing an MPO dedicated call for projects application, you're going to get something that looks just like this. It's going to ask you select the funding sources that you think your project is eligible for, and also at the same time that you actually want to compete for. So for Kentucky, the top three bullet points are the only ones you would be eligible for, because it's the only ones we have in Kentucky is SDBG, TA, or CRP. And if you think your new project is eligible for CRP and TA and SDBG under the guidelines, then click all of them, unless you don't want that project to compete for one of the funding sources. So if you have a project, you think it's eligible for CRP, but for whatever reason, you don't want it to compete. Like if you were granted CRP dollars, you don't want to compete for CRP for whatever reason, then just don't click the box. So what's eligible for, and also do you actually want to compete for it if it is eligible? And you click the boxes there, and that's how one of the ways we will help determine what we need to look at on our end for, is it actually eligible for TA or CRP or SDBG, and what do you want to compete for? Let's get this, you can read it. And that's all I have. Any questions from anybody at this time? Also, of course, email me, call me, whatever, outside of this meeting if you have other questions as well.
I would just comment that in Kentucky, $50 million is one heck of a lot of money to be available in light of the fact that we have a huge backlog of projects that are not moving. And that I've expressed concern that when project sponsors are given the opportunity to pick any funding source, just give me some money, like you just showed, they're gonna check all the boxes. And that's going to create a situation where there's going to be potentially mixed or inappropriate, difficult to use funding for certain projects. And that might work as an accounting exercise on the front end. But on the project delivery side, it creates a lot of unnecessary delays. And so I just, maybe as a work group, we could talk about that.
And that is in the updated guidebook. We do have a section on there that we'll definitely remind the working group when we have that, is we don't want, to the extent that we can, we would like to not combine different funding sources. If you're awarded an SDBG funds, then you're an SDBG project. If you're awarded CRP funds, you're a CRP project. Unless there are certain circumstances met that we talked about.
I mean, I'm in a situation with program management where I'm being asked to clean that up. And so I'll be in a position to have to go back to some local governments and say, this is your opportunity, or your job is going to be to throw back TAP funds and fish for SLO dollars, because that's the instruction I've been getting from our money management office. And so I just want you all to be aware of that before we go over this. Mixing and matching funds seems easy and friendly, and in reality, it's very difficult to implement and get your money on your projects and then on the street. That's just my experience.
When we make the application, say you pick all three, does, Commitee does their review of those applications. They start to make some opinion back to the sponsors that why you may have selected all three, that type of project's better for this funding? Or is that purely going to be at the sponsorship level to make that determination, what they think is the best funding source for this particular project?
I don't know if there's always a best funding source for a particular project, but there should be multi-layered scrutiny of eligibility. You all as project sponsors should be, yes, this fits, in my opinion, as a project sponsor. KIPTA staff will give it that test. If needed, we will request assistance from state DOTs or federal highways as appropriate to say, hey, we believe this fits under the CRP program, under this caveat that's in there. Do you agree? I'm sure there'll be a project or two that we need to do that. If at any level it's not eligible for one of those, then we would probably strike consideration from that and then say, hey, you're only eligible for STPG, keeping that in mind. Could be a catch-all. Right. You know, one other comment that I'll add, we get often requested, hey, when will funds be available at KIPTA? And now's the time. So, you know, as you know, for better or worse, this is 2 years worth of funding that's available right now this fall. And so does that mean there will be $0 available until 2 years from now? No, not necessarily, but that's also a possibility as well. So now's the time. That's kind of the nature of the extended run up, right? We're talking about applications due on October 31st. We're talking to y'all on June 12th about this. Be sure to take this seriously. Get with your counterparts, your colleagues, your agencies, and make sure you have the right projects that are going to set you up for the future.
But if it's a sidewalk project, well, it could be SLO or it could be CAP. So as a sponsor, it makes sense that I would click both of those boxes, because if I don't get selected at SLO, but there is available funding there at TAP, then I might be able to still get that project funded. Right?
We would encourage you to do that, right? There's no reason not to cast a wider net within reason. Yeah. Right? Don't cast the net, don't stretch it, don't say, hey, no, I don't think it is, I'll check it anyways and make somebody tell me no.
I'm only judged against the one category I select, then it kind of, even though there's leftover funds in the other one, I would have missed that opportunity.
And this might not be something that's pertinent to J-Town, but it would for other agencies in Indiana in particular. Keep in mind what Brady was saying early on about how certain funding categories in Indiana, we need to bolster those because of the limited flexibility that NDOT provides. They do provide us flexibility to, over a period of time, spend our money in each of those categories. We don't have to spend it each and every year. So we are in need of certain types of projects. Namely, it looks like the CMAQ and CRP projects probably at the top of the list. And so those things are aligned. So most projects, virtually every project that CMAQ eligible is going to be CRP eligible too. So that there's some overlap there that we might be thankful for here in a few months.
Any other questions for Brady?
I have another question. I noticed that the funding that's available says it's fiscal year 28 and 29. So if I was to apply for money, is it fair to say that, and I'm awarded that, my project is awarded that money, is it fair to say that I will be waiting until 2028 to use that money?
That year, if that's, yes, I would say so in Kentucky. That's
So
almost,
it's not
almost
gonna
has to be
get
the case.
programmed earlier unless there's some wheeling and dealing.
Yeah.
Because I would basically program somebody early. I would basically have to move someone else's programming out of my way as well.
We would want to avoid moving somebody else's project out of the way. If somebody said, hey, I've got something in 26 and I'd rather move that to 28.
And we also would not want to we would not want to program any projects earlier than the sponsor is ready to actually do. So if you wanted to do a project in 28, but the only funding that was available was in 26, if you're not committed and ready to do the project, then you still wouldn't want to give that project the money until it's.
I'd be more in a position where I'd get money in 28, but I have a 25, I need in 25 today, how do I get that money? And, oh, because otherwise my project would just sit on the shelf for 3 years waiting for 2028 to arrive so I could use the money. That's what I'm interested in knowing about.
So one avenue for funds is there still is the cost increase reserve that will still be in place for each of the fiscal years mentioned. So right now in fiscal year 24, there's $1 million. If no one else claims it fiscal year 24, that will carry over to fiscal year 25 cost increase reserve. So that will be over $5 million at that point for cost increases for a fiscal year 25 project. Not a new project, but for an existing project, you could have cost increases. Other than that, other than swapping out projects and that being approved by ATCC and TPC, you can't really get any of the 28 or 29 money in 25 because we don't have it yet, I guess.
Okay, thank you.
See what you're saying though. We have the amounts that he showed for Kentucky for 25, 26, 27, the carryover amounts, if you will. That's an optimistic thing. There's no denying. That's if things get obligated on time. Projects that are in the pipeline right now get obligated in those years on time. We know, historically speaking,
They don't.
they don't.
I realize that, but when people look at the SLO programming matrix, they see I said a certain project will be constructed in fiscal 25 or whenever, and that's a commitment. The public might look at that and say, "There's money on this project for 25." So when you, if I accelerate my project, and I wreck someone else's commitment, and I know that's a big deal. I just, general questions because I know we have a lot of interesting funding challenges coming up here with this cultural projects.
There always are opportunities downstream of the call for projects for those same maneuvers.
Yeah.
Not great opportunities always, right?
Yeah.
But there are opportunities for somebody when somebody says, "Hey, I need to move this out." We know that happens. We know it's going to happen. There's going to be some that might get kicked out, right, because of the rules that exist. There might be opportunities then too. That might not move you from 28 to 25, but it might move you up a year, and maybe that makes a difference. Right?
Yeah. Or it's great. There's money available.
It's true.
Thank you, Brady, appreciate that. Next item on the agenda is the organized area boundaries locator and story map. Chris?
About today.
I don't. Okay. Cool.
Right. Now for something different, let's talk about geography in a few minutes. So, myself and some of our GIS staff, we put together a little story map and also a tool that I'll get to toward the end where you all can put in your location of a project and you'll be able to see if it's within the census defined urban area boundary. And both of these will be on our website under transportation on the GIS webpage. So, our KIPTA urban area boundaries 2020 version. So I'll quick walk through. I'm not gonna read it. I hope some of you will go check it out online. The story map's gonna provide an overview of the 10-year update cycle and the nuances between the census and the federal highways definitions of the words urban and rural. There's a little bit on how this relates to the formation of MPOs, what it takes to make a transportation management area, and also the metropolitan planning area update process. I've got several links in here for even more details that y'all can reference if you're looking into that. Okay. And something you see on my screen, I can see it up there. So I tell a little bit about the story of the changes to the Louisville, Jefferson County, Kentucky, Indiana urban area throughout the last few updates. And one of the interesting things is that in 2010, the census used the term urban area and also urban cluster. The urban cluster, what that meant, it was in areas between 5,000 people, but still under 50,000 people. And then urban areas meant 50,000 or more people. They have retired the term urban cluster at this point now. So there were significant changes, as many of you are quite aware, between the 2020 census update criteria and previous updates. These impacted the funding expectations. And now the metropolitan planning area includes not just one large urban area and a small urban cluster, which was Clarksville or Charlestown, Indiana. Now we have two additional, what used to be called urban clusters, but they're just called urban areas. That's just even more confusing now. So in total, we have 4 urban areas, but 1 is above 50,000 people and 3 are in that group of 5,000 to 50,000 people. And that's Charlestown, Indiana, LaGrange, Kentucky, and Mount Washington. Got a map here that can be expanded, and you can view the census defined urban areas, or what we were calling the jagged areas during the process. So what about the adjusted urban area boundaries? This is something that many of you worked on with KIPTA staff in coming up with some recommendations that we later submitted. And so the adjusted urban area, I'm having trouble navigating this. Okay, here we go. So this, when you get to this part, it goes to the side. And we have a few pages just kind of detailing what the adjusted urban area boundary is and what that means and the nuance between that and the census defined urban area. And then I've got some screenshots of each of the 4. So what we're looking at here, the Louisville urban area, the darker green is the census defined one, or the jagged boundary. And then the lighter green behind it is the smooth boundary or adjusted boundary. And you can pan around these maps. We've got a close up of each of the 4 areas here. And then on the very last page, it'll bring you to our tool that Zach, our GIS manager, created. Trying to have this queued up so we can put in get the address. So you'll go on to the tool and you can type in any address. Like, let's say hypothetically, you're looking about doing a project maybe out in Floyd County and you're not sure, is this within the urban boundary? Is it not? They're eligible to apply no matter where within the metropolitan planning area, but the federal dollars, the federal funding comes from the ones that are within the Louisville urban area. So you can put in your address and search it, and it'll zoom right in. We're here at the headquarters, and we are definitely within that boundary. But that's how that tool works. Does anyone have any questions? Kind of skipped over some of the information I was gonna say just because we're going a little long.
I'll add to that, you know, we've presented this type of stuff a few times over the last year or two, and this is gonna be a great tool for somebody new to your agencies or whatnot. So when you say, hey, well, you know, you've heard it from me, from Chris, and from others previously, and this would be a good tool for the new people in your agencies. Or what about KIPTA? What does that mean when you go to KIPTA, and where's the funding eligible for? How do they get funding? So this is a lot of fun story, and we're always willing to tell it. If somebody asks us, and we get an email or a call that maybe this might be a great tool for somebody else that you might be able to point people to, or we'll point people to in the future.
Yeah. And again, it's eligible all within the MPA boundary, but it and previously, historically, working groups have supported funding projects, even if they're outside of the urban area. But there might come a time where it's nice to know.
Yeah.
It's nice to know.
Yeah, and looked at, you know, that's another way of looking at that, especially in our Indiana communities, is the maybe more glass half full way of looking at it is, okay, you're outside the red area, outside the Louisville area, and you're outside the Charlestown area. Well, that makes you eligible for some unique rural funds in Indiana, and so maybe it's a win to be outside the urban area. It's not always a win to be inside. Sometimes it might be a win to be outside, I suppose, because you can play both sides, right? You can say, hey, I'm coming to the KIPTA table for some of those urban bucks, and I'm going to NDOT for some of those rural bucks.
That don't play into the point system evaluation.
The urban,
If you're in or out.
not currently. We don't have that currently. No, that's pretty much up to the discretion of the group that's making those determinations. And again, this is less a glass half full, this is more glass half empty. Now that there are the Mount Washington and LaGrange areas, it's reasonable to say that that dollar gets stretched even thinner on the Kentucky side, right? That we're only getting dollars for that red area. That's a tough choice that the working group's gonna have to make, and also the TPC is gonna have to make in those cases. Wish we didn't have to make, frankly. We wish that the urbanized area boundary definition was maybe more consistent. It would have made things simpler, because those areas are not less urban in 2020 than they were in 2010. In fact, they are tremendously more urban, right? Yet they're less eligible, one could argue, for the urban dollars, right? The Grange area and Mount Washington area are growing as fast as about anywhere in the state. You would think they would, and they're just as associated with Louisville areas they've ever been, but the eligibility is still there, but it's a little bit dicier than it was before. Yes.
Any other questions for Chris? Thank you, Chris. Next item on the agenda, number 10, traffic count database update.
Okay, how you guys doing this afternoon? I'm just here to, you wanna open up the page real quick? Talk about the updates we made to the traffic count database. I'd say in the past 2 weeks, we've added several hundred at least traffic counts for KYTC and also metro counts. And look for more updates, if you wanna, you can find our traffic count, app on our KIPTA, data hub. If you go down just one more, Greg, it's right there, traffic counts, click on that for me. And it's located right here, and it should open up and look like the KIPTA area with a bunch of purple dots, and all those purple dots are the counts. If you just want to click on one of them, Greg, we can show them the information available. So you can see here, this one's in Spencer County. It's, what does that say, 2010, gives the count, it's from KYTC. So right now, all we have is just every count available out there. Probably from 2011 till 2023 is the newest counts. I'm gonna pose this question to you. This is all I was gonna present, but to the TTCC, anyone that uses this or knows of anyone that uses this application, is there anything we can add to it that you can think of? Any kind of query tool, any kind of, would you like to see years, color coded, or maybe their own layers? We're just kind of,
You said the purple dots are one moment in time for a traffic count at that particular, so the date's attached to that correct hyperlink,
Yeah.
because of the count that it goes deep as telling you turning limits and all that.
it does not tell you that much just on this.
It's just a
This
count.
is just a count.
Having said that, Matt, like this count right here on Washington Trail and J-Town, we likely, behind the scenes, have the raw data, okay? If there are counts that you as a jurisdiction say, hey, can I get more information? Jim asks about traffic counts all the time. If we have it, we will 100% share that. That's one of the things we've discussed internally is how can, because we have those turning diagrams on the raw count data, especially on those counts that we get from Louisville Metro and contractor pit. Potentially someday. This is not coming real soon. Could we get that? Could we have a link right there that has that raw count data from the consultant that did the count, or whoever did the count? I think that'd be a nice addition if we could pull that off. That's a monumental task because we have so many.
Right.
Yeah. And so yes, so this was a count done in 2023 as part of the Louisville Metro contract out on Waterston Trail there.
The other question is, so I click on that, that was done in 2022. What about the count that was done in 2020?
Exactly.
Where are those?
They're in there. If it's in the same location, and it's within the last 10 years, it should be there. I can't see any that he's pulling up that I can.
So are all these dots different years, or is this a snapshot?
Yeah, every dot is an individual count on an
You chose
individual.
one that were done 2019, unless for some reason you geocoded and did a count the exact same spot.
Yes, I think that's correct. I think that there's this distinction to be made there for the KYTC count. So in J-Town on Taylorsville Road, let's say, when it's not one of the counts that we would have a turning movement count, many of these where you see a cluster of these dots in around one intersection, that's a pretty good indicator that was a turning movement count there. And we've used that data to give us 4 counts. That is count in each of the 4 legs. In those cases, it looks like here, if I had to guess that this was one count and we geolocated it kind of close to Electron Drive and Washington Trail. And then the other year, Greg, if you click the one to the southeast down here, I bet it's a different year. Yeah, it looks like that was counted in 2018, 23. This is an instance where they're both up there. We'd like to clean that up a little bit if we could.
Yeah.
But we'd also like to not permanently get rid of that 2018 data, right? We want it visually to be better, but that 2018 value data might have value to the city of Jefferson County. Might not have value to the person that says, hey, how many cars are out there right now? Right.
Well, but did it help us?
So I guess what I would pose the question to you is, would it be helpful to you if we had, let's say, each year, the database for each year be its own layer, and you could say like, you could have a little layer box that picked up and said, okay, I want to see all the counts from 2011, and you click just 2011 on. And you say, well, I want to see 2011 and 2023 together, and you can click both of them on, but all the years in between would not be on. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And you could have the opportunity or the choice to pick which year you would like to see. Would that be something that would be beneficial, or?
I think that'd be useful. Yeah, I mean, in most cases, in your transportation work you do, you look at current count for the most part. But when you start looking at,
you want to see growth.
but from the economic development standpoint, then it helps me even to sell a piece of property if it's a business entity on showing how the traffic has increased. So, that could be extrapolated, interpreted into an economic development benefit for businesses that are considered located in our city or something. So somehow looking at those, plus from a planning perspective, as a planner, then we can also look at that and see, is it increasing at the level that it really needs to have a different design interpretation of it? Or if it isn't, or very consistent, then maybe, you don't make that large investment and add that extra lane. I think it ain't gonna be there.
Yeah, I had was, storming in my brain of what things
I don't
people
want
might
to
use.
the hyperlink detection, everything else. is
Yeah.
there. But if you're gonna be geocoding it with every particular location, then it may be hard to do that unless you're
Unless you have to buy a year.
Yeah, or you're conscious when you put in there that if you saw that there was one done in 2019, you're coming back now in 2023, don't just locate it 10 feet off, now I got two different data. You know.
Put it right on
to that
top
same-
and get rid of the other.
Well, or just add it to the hyperlink up past that, or just sort of that, or.
So you'd prefer us to have something like that that shows historical than to blow some away? Because I think we're getting to the point now where we have so many that to clean it up,
Yeah.
to get the best count, typically the best means the most recent. To get the best count out there is what we would think was ideal, but we also don't want to lose that old data. But you're saying that older data, those older counts are quite valuable or useful, and so please do not blow them away, at least keep them in here in some way.
Or if it's more complicated to add it to hyperlinks, just retain it that way, then if I'm coming, I'm looking at the current data, but I want the historic data, you already have it here, just, I mean,
So
away.
you could just create a new layer for, let's say, 2022, 2023, or 2021. Anything since 2020, have a hyperlink on it.
I tell you what, that might sound good to me is like, because this is our first overhaul in a few years, because we kind of didn't know what the heck to do with it. The year 2020 counts were kind of like, we don't really want to share those, or there, to the extent that some still existed, traffic was so different, we probably didn't want to throw those into the mix, and so we kind of took a hiatus on it. But if we did, hey, here's a selectable layer for 2023, 22, 21, and then maybe there's another one that was like, maybe we call it pre-COVID or something like that. That would have all the historic ones. That would paint a prettier picture on here. It would be a simpler picture, fewer dots. But you could cycle that on and off potentially and get those old counts. Would that be something that would be?
Yeah, I think something like that.
Mike King says queries by year and ADT and increments of 5K would be great if possible.
Yes. Okay. All right, that's a good idea. All right, let's see what we can do.
All right.
See what we can do. We do have a bunch of, this is the time of year we get a bunch of counts, by the way. And so this is, later this summer, we'll hit it with another update of at least fresh counts and then hopefully some.
I think the transportation study, park study we're doing, picking up these counts.
Good. Okay.
Sounds good. No action required, we just sharing information.
So either of you, I'm just curious, because you mentioned that I get requests out from you frequently, and I'm actually got a couple that came up today that I'll be asking you about later. When you provide that to me, does that automatically go on to this map?
If KIPTA was doing the counts, some of those counts are KIPTA counts. Most of those counts are not. For the time being, they probably won't be KIPTA counts going forward, because we're kind of out of the business of doing the counts ourselves. In Oldham County's case, 4 counts in Oldham County, our best bet right now is the use of the streetlight platform, because we can get very detailed estimates of count for planning level work. Maybe it's not perfect to do traffic signal timing, but it probably is good enough to do planning level assessment of, yes, is it plus or minus a few hundred or something.
We do counts ourselves, you guys want to plug in?
Yes. So I think we have 7,000 counts. There's like 7,000 points on that map right now. The vast majority of those come to KIPTA through Louisville Metro Public Works and the contract that KIPTA has had, long time contract. The federal funds get passed through to them. That's why we have so many in Jefferson County, to be clear. The ones in Oldham County and Bullitt County and the rural KIPTA technical counties are going to be KYPC counts stations or KIPTA counts from a while back. And so those are on there as well.
Thank you, Dave.
Go ahead. Thank you.
Next item on the agenda is amendment number 7, 2326. Tip from Chris.
So, this is barely a presentation. All right, so I'm gonna talk about the Amendment 7 tentative timeline. Brady already mentioned earlier, for those that were listening, we have our project application deadline for this at July 19th, 2024. I'll be sending out an email shortly about that to everyone, and also another reminder as it gets closer to that date. Keep in mind that this is intended for any regular update updates that are not eligible for administrative modifications. We have a process, we'll go through them. If they can be made through an admin mod, we would certainly do that. But this is for the changes that probably are gonna have to be an amendment. This is different than the call for projects. This schedule is designed for a full amendment. And it's, which means it's gonna include projects that might be in need of air quality conformity analysis, so it's one of the lengthier ones. I've got a couple things to point out. This is our best case scenario schedule. The air quality conformity activities, they could take longer just because we've had some staffing changes and, this is our best case scenario. Also, projects in this amendment might end up still in the amendment while the call for projects is going on, and that will make things complicated. If we hit this schedule, there's a good chance that the full amendment will clear before the call for projects deadline ends, but there's a high chance that we might not hit that. So something to keep in mind, but.
Keep in mind for the projects that might be a part of both. If you're part of one or the other, it'll be clean. The projects that are both could be interesting.
Yes, but as always, we'll work it out the best we can. And that's all I've got. Anyone has any questions?
Any questions for Chris? Appreciate it. Next time on the agenda, other business, Andy?
I do. I want to recognize Eric Tate from I was in Indiana. Thank you for joining us, Erica. Sorry we didn't get to introduce your colleagues.
Yeah, they had a call, sorry.
Understand. Arthur Jones, City of Shepherdsville, I saw was on the line. Thank you, Arthur, for joining us. Tracy Lovell, I think I saw Tracy on there. And if I missed anybody else, I apologize. Thank you all for joining us today. I want to introduce Aaron Marcelli. Oh, it's okay. There you go. Aaron Marcelli is new to Commitee. He started back in May. He's a transportation planning analyst. We talked about traffic counts a minute ago with Jim. And so thankfully, when Jim calls for traffic counts these days, I'm going to say, Aaron Marcelli, please help Oldham County out.
I'll get your email address.
That's right. You want to introduce yourself to the group?
Okay, thank you. So my name is Aaron Marcelli, second grade, and I'm currently a new transportation planning analyst here at Commitee, and I'm happy to be here. Thank you very much.
I'll brag on him a little bit. He's not going to say it. He just finished his PhD actually at Wayne State University in Michigan. So we're real happy to have him. He'll be doing a lot of the engineering, the modeling side, some of the stuff I used to do for those who've been around a while. Some of the stuff Jeremy Shaw used to do for those who've been around a little bit. So we're real happy to have Aaron Marcelli that tip. So welcome. More importantly to this committee, we are planning to go ahead and cancel our July meeting. Okay, so no July TTCC. Okay, well, hold on, I got more on that. July TPC, for those that plan to attend, will probably cancel them both. Okay, so for those that attend the board meetings, there's probably a couple of you, Keith. At this time, the board meeting probably is a go, but it might not be a go too. Depends on the agenda item. So July transportation meetings called off. Take summer vacation from Commitee meetings. However. Yesterday, the consultant team that's working on the Safe Streets and Roads for All grant program that almost everybody in the room is involved with, and met with Commitee staff in our monthly meetings. We talked about the next steps on that one. It's about time to do a full stakeholder meeting for that group. Okay, and so what was proposed, and I think it's convenient, I hope you all will agree, is that instead of TTCC at 1 o'clock on the second Wednesday of July, since most of you all probably are part of both. And you might have Commitee penciled in on your calendar, whether you're not here or not, we're going to go ahead and plan to schedule that next meeting for July 10th. That is at the typical TTCC time. That is at the Safe Streets and Roads for All meeting of everybody, all the agencies that are involved. We'll meet. It will be hybrid. We'd love to have you in person. It'll be a hybrid just like TTCC. So instead of TTCC on July 10th at 1 o'clock, we're going to do the Safe Streets and Roads for All meeting. Just to hopefully that keeps things a little simpler.
All right, but then I'll be here.
You are here. You're not here.
Yeah, I'll be here. It was 11th, I was thinking I just didn't have to do it.
I'll get it. It'll be fine. Don't worry. Let's see. Also on the Safe Streets and Roads for All front, that meeting on the July 10th, that's going to be everybody in one room, talk about the status of it and then where we are. Okay. Subsequent to that, later in July, is when what we talked about at our last meeting, when we're going to have the one-on-one meetings. That is about an hour with each jurisdiction. The way it's going to be designed is that Kentucky jurisdiction will certainly be invited to schedule a time at KIPTA. It's likely to be on July 22nd and 23rd. What we'll do, I think the plan right now is to do July 22nd here at KIPTA. July 23rd is likely to be at a Southern Indiana location to help make it easy for those in Southern Indiana. You can come to Indiana if you're a Kentucky agency and vice versa. And then for those that might be at the beach that week or whatever, we'll probably have some availability to do a backup time, maybe the week prior or the week after that, to do an hour. That's an hour with your agency coming to meet with KIPTA, the HDR, the Taylor Shifter Williams staff, the Palmer Engineering staff, to go over. They've got great dashboards that they're building right now. We're kind of in a behind the scenes phase. I promise you there's big, hot and heavy work going on behind the scenes to showcase kind of the work going on. And that's where they'll have identified, hot spots in your community, and we can talk that over and see what your all spots are. So again, that's probably on July 22nd and 23rd. So I think more information to come probably next week or so on that, but please do mark that down on your calendars. I think that's all I have. I apologize for the long this.
Thank you, Andy. Appreciate it. Any other questions before this committee? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Somebody.
There's a second. All those in favor, say aye. Raise your hand.
Aye.